Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on the devastation of Ostermark, playing as the Empire against the forces of the Greenskins. And it was requested that I try to do a battle with Chevygryph Knights, so I decided to one-up that a little bit, and we're going with Max Chevron Chevygryph Knights, because that was actually something I kind of wanted to try out, if you could make veterancy work. It's something I've also been tempted to try with Blood Knights, because if you give Blood Knights 9 chevrons, they're sitting in like the mid 50s, I think, for both melee defense and melee attack. It's pretty nuts. But I really wanted to try out Chevygryph Knights. Chevygryph Knights did get a somewhat buff in the last patch. I think they got 8 more HP, and I think they also gained a little bit of melee defense, I want to say. Maybe they didn't. Maybe I'm misremembering. But regardless, Chevygryph Knights did get some buffs. Definitely are tankier now than they used to be, which I think is good. They are now on par with other Empire heavy cav as far as HP pools go, which means that there's a little bit less of a trade-off there in terms of just survivability against like AP shooting or things like that. Regardless, wanting to bring 2 Chevygryph Knights against Greenskins, I think this is actually a very good matchup to bring normal Chevygryphs, because you don't really need the halberds for anything. Sure, there's Ragnarok Queens, but realistically, Greenskins probably aren't going to bring those because of Empire Black Powder weapons. So I think Chevygryph Knights are good, because they can especially mince through Black Orcs, and they can avoid getting bogged down if your opponent pops a wall, which is much more difficult with other units, as they're going to get caught up by wall and they're going to get annihilated. So regardless, getting into this build, I did bring Boris Todbringer and the Amber Wizard for that crazy Terror Bomb squad. Boris Todbringer, of course, does have all of his kit. He's got Crush the Weak, he's got Midland Runefang, he does have the White Cloak of Ulrich, Hold the Line, Foe Seeker, and a Deadly Onslaught. I really do like Crush the Weak because it synergizes with Blood Roar, Fear, and Terror. On our Amber Wizard, we also do have Flock of Doom, of course. We've got Wild Heart as well as Power Stone, because I didn't want to get caught up by some Mass Goblin build, which is kind of what my opponent did here, and not be able to counter it. Otherwise, we do have a Jade Wizard, because I do think healing is important. We have Regrowth, we have Earthblood, we've got Life Bloom, and we do have a Power Stone, mostly to back up our 2 very expensive Chevygryphs. These guys almost cost 2,000 with 9 chevrons. As well as to, of course, heal up the Amber Wizard. Because while the Amber Wizard isn't exactly a huge expensive investment, I'd rather keep that Wombo combo Fear and Terror Bomb alive as long as I can. Otherwise, we do have 2 units of Pistoliers on either end, and our front line is composed purely of 5 somewhat chevroned up Empire Spearmen. And, you know, these guys will do okay. They're going to hold. If my opponent just decides to roll me over with a wad, sure, they're not going to last long, but hey, they're a speed bump. Elsewhere, for my opponent, he went super wide, though not necessarily, this isn't necessarily just a pure Goblin build, he just got very wide. He does have Moonhowlers and Wolf Riders in this corner, he does have Dirkid Squigs in the other, giving him a lot of Vanguard potential, and a lot of tools to sort of mince up a backline, had I had one, and a lot of Empire players do bring significant backline play, so you can't really fault him for that. Otherwise, on his main line, he does have a mix of Chevron up Goblins, as well as Orc Boys, and I do believe some Night Goblins sprinkled in there as well somewhere. These guys, of course, do have decent melee stats. With Wa, they'll mince through Empire State troops easy peasy. The only thing that'll hold them up okay is Greatswords, but even Greatswords will get overwhelmed by, say, Orc Boys, or even Orc Big Guns. If they're roided up with a Wa, will do a lot of work. There are also 2 Squighurt to provide some mobile AP options. Interesting choice, probably trying to experiment a little bit. Squighurt, not necessarily the most competitive unit, but they can definitely do some AP damage, and they're cheap. I think they're like 500 gold. Savage Orc Boar Boys here, who did recently, actually no, these are the vanilla variants, so not big guns, so a little bit of mobile AP as well. And then Skarsnik for some AP anti-large, as well as his wall and AoE buffs. He does, of course, have the Tricksy Traps, as well as Spite of the Bad Moon. A Orc Shaman here with Foot of Gork, as well as Fists of Gork, and the Gaze of Mork, which is interesting. You don't see that all too often. And then a Doomdiver Catapult there. Some nasty Skulkers for backline defense, and we do have a handful of Night Goblin Archers hidden here as well. So very wide, very diverse sort of roster. This isn't something you'll always see. It's sort of this mismatch or very all over the place build. But definitely my opponent seems to have a counter for basically everything. It's just a very, very different build. And it's not, and this isn't, as far as I can tell, a random match, because the Orc Shaman wouldn't have all of his spells if that were the case. So this isn't like a random build. Regardless, my Pistoliers here posturing forward. I did bring them to provide a little bit of anti-squish unit pressure, things to counteract trolls and that sort of stuff, and light cav. So we are posturing forward a little bit, getting a few pot shots in there, but I immediately withdraw because I don't want to get caught out in a protracted engagement against Night Goblins. In the meantime, I don't want this Doom Diver firing away and harassing me, so we're going to dive in with Boris as well as the Amber Wizard, doing quite a bit of hurt here. The Doom Diver Catapult is going to rout almost immediately because they have no leadership to speak of. Between Blood Roar, Fear, Terror, they just will not hold. Poor Goblins just completely fall apart. But the Boar Boys are on point, they're on station, they're going to charge out and start working on Boris. The Amber Wizard, fortunately, is a little bit out of further away, so he's going to be able to extricate himself just fine. And this actually does bait out my opponent's Wah. This is actually a cool thing. If you've got flyers and you're fairly confident about your ability to escape, which, to be honest, this might have been a bit of a greedy play here for me, but if you're fairly confident about your ability to escape, your flyers can often sort of bait out a walk, because your opponent will be trying to shut you down really hard. I knew my opponent didn't have Wartsag. I didn't see any nasty Skulkers. There were a few back here, but my opponent didn't get into the fight fast enough. And so I was able to kind of bait him in here, get a nice flock of Doom Overcast on these guys. And now Boris will slowly but surely kind of waddle his way out, because he does have the mass and the speed with Foe Seeker to get out of there. Elsewhere in the front line fight, my opponent is committing his Squig Herds, who on the charge actually do surprising amounts of damage to Demigryph Knights. A lot more than I had anticipated. But Demigryphs, of course, with that monstrous melee stats, 45 and 48 melee defense, are just invincible here. They're going to mince through that Squig Herd and get by just fine. And I then immediately pull them away, because I do not want them getting bogged down against Orc big guns at all if I can avoid it. I'll just let the spears handle that. Elsewhere, Beast are forcing off these cheap light cav. The Demigryph Knights, having taken a grand total of 21 damage, absolutely devastating losses there, are still very much alive and well, and you can see they are pulling back in, getting ready to find an opening. Over here, the Dirkid Squig is bogged down by the Amber Wizard, which is very good for me. Now, certainly they will do some damage to him, because he doesn't have the best of melee stats, but these guys are immune to psychology. They could be a problem if they got into my backline, and I don't really want them around. You don't want troublemaking cav around. If you start having routes and they can pursue your troops off the field or shadow them, that can be really bad. In the meantime, though, the Demigryphs finally do have an opening, so they're going to sally around, and you can see these guys, certainly they're a bit mauled. They have lost about 800 HP in that engagement with the Squigs, but now they're going to be able to sort of commit here. You can see the Nasty Skulkers coming out of the woodwork to be an absolute menace. They actually popped their smoke a little too soon. That is something you want to be wary of, guys, is prematurely popping smoke. But the Demigryphs actually get a nice little wrap here. They are on the Nasty Skulkers. They are on the Night Goblins as well, so they've caught all these units. Now we're actually going to hit them with a regrowth. And with that, these guys are just going to have great stats. They're going to be able to hold out really well here, and just really aren't going to fall apart too easily. So that's really, really good. With that 48 melee defense, these Nasty Skulkers really don't stand much of a chance of hitting. Elsewhere in the meantime, Beast Leader's kind of whittling down some more big guns. You can see some of my spears have routed. The Demigryphs overextending a little bit, trying to pursue the Squigs, but oh well, it is what it is. We have managed to eradicate the Doom Diver Catapult for a second time, and are now once again taking off with the Amber Wizard, getting another flock of Doom on this line here. And the Demigryphs, they're still around kicking. They haven't lost a single model. They're at 4,200 HP. They've lost, a couple hundred over the course of this game, probably a couple thousand HP at this point, but the heals are keeping them up and running, and all is good in the world. Over here, the Night Goblins are getting shot to death. The Demigryphs are coming in with a flank charge, and of course, they're going to cleave through some cheap chaff with ease. And so we are going to dive in with Boris and the Amber Wizard, forcing an immediate rout with that Wombo combo. I think it's like it's just minus 12, I think, leadership between just the Amber Wizard and Boris, and then you get another fear. You get fear on top of that, and you get terror potentially, so there's just so much leadership screwing around that can happen there, plus rear charges and all that. So these goblins are in full flight. Demigryph Knights farming kills there. Demigryphs actually, they perform a lot better against infantry than Demigryph Halberds do. And I'm not entirely sure why that is. It's not simply their splash, because the splash on the two units is the same. But somewhere, they do attack a little faster, I know. So they do definitely perform a lot better against infantry. And you can see they are going to cleave down these Nasty Skulkers. And with that, my opponent is going to find himself in a bad spot. He's in a bit of a Helm's Deep formation here. My Pistoliers being badly positioned here and getting shot to death by the archers. But I'm able to get the Pistoliers onto my opponent's backline. You can see they're actually diving in and routing off the Squig Herds. The Dirkid Squigs over there being forced off by the Pistoliers. Pistoliers with their recent melee buffs are a little more competitive. And, of course, Foot of Gork does basically nothing to the Demigryphs. That was probably a normal cast, admittedly, but it really didn't do very much. Now we are now able to get on the Savage Orc Boys. You can see the double whammy of Demigryphs, so almost a full unit of cav here, actually more than a full unit of cav normally. 24, you got 48 Demigryphs in there, getting supported by the Griffins, just a majestic sight, crushing these foul beasts, these disgusting pigs. The Pistoliers wailing on them with their pistols, and yeah, it's going to be a slow and steady. At this point, it's just game over, essentially. The Pistoliers are very quick. They're going to be able to mop up these flanks, these peripheral troops, these Night Goblins, and that sort of stuff. We actually push in the Jade Wizard here to force these guys' leadership down as well. Goblins with, they do have some stuff. They do have some chevrons, so they will hold a little better than normal with that rear charge. Their leadership will buckle, and they're going to tear out. So, some brutal stuff. Gaze of Mort going down does absolutely nothing to Boris. He just kind of shrugs it off without a care in the world. And despite his low armor, the Amber Wizard is able to sort of absorb the Night Goblin damage. The Pistoliers diving in from behind, and it is at this point just GG for the poor Greenskins. And my opponent does call it quits at this stage. So, well, the kill counts are crazy. The Demigryphs didn't lose a single model this game. Certainly my opponent's build a little odd. Like I said, I don't think this is an auto-gen build because the spell selection would be complete on the Orcaster if that were the case. I think there was a bit of experimental play here. But Demigryph Knights without Halberds, I think they're a bit of an underutilized unit. I do think Halberds are one of those units you will usually get more mileage out of. Certainly they will perform significantly better against cavalry. And they'll perform okay against infantry. Whereas Demigryph Knights will perform the Demigryph Knights normal variant will perform significantly better against infantry, and of course missiles, because they've got shields. But they do perform significantly worse versus cav. They'll still win versus most cav in the game, but they are not going to get those devastating victories that you would get with Halberds. That aside, I do think they're underutilized. I do think there's matchups where you can get huge value out of them. I think one such matchup is the Greenskin matchup, because with Greenskins, you don't have to worry about their cav too much. You don't really have to worry about their monsters very much. You really need to be dealing with Black Orcs. Black Orcs are the key problem. Black Orcs backed by lots of chaff. So in that situation, I think you don't really want to be bringing handguns and relying too much on your infantry, because that can get swamped and your backline can get compromised. And in that situation, I don't really think you want, because of that, you won't have handguns. You either go with Outriders or Demigryph Knights, in my opinion. And I personally prefer the normal Demigryph Knights in that situation. Also, because Demigryph Knights don't care if they get caught by like Wolf Riders or Moon Howlers, whereas Outriders get caught by those units and they're screwed. So Demigryph Knights, they'll just mince through everything, and I do really think they're a good unit in this matchup. Other matchups they're good in, Dwarves. It was specifically requested I don't do Dwarves, but Dwarves, they can be okay if it's a map where it's very not enclosed, but if it's a map that has lots of terrain. And you always want to check the map before you, I think, when you're building. But if it's a map that has lots of terrain options, then Demigryph Knights can do really well against Dwarves. They will absolutely devastate their infantry line. They can soak up some missile fire, and obviously they'll do rather well. Now, obviously, you don't want them getting caught out by, say, organ guns or cannons. So if it's a very flat, open map, like, say, Chaos Wastes, this might not be the best idea. But definitely, Demigryphs can do great against Dwarves. I'm trying to think of other matchups where they can perform rather well. Skaven, they probably do well, but I think against Skaven you're better off with cheaper cav options because you don't really need the AP. Beastmen they can do surprisingly well in, but once again, I'm not sure they're the option you want to go for. I think you're better off with some cheaper cav usually, and then you can generally the handful of heavier monsters they might have you can deal with through shooting or lords or that sort of stuff. Obviously against factions that can bring significant cavalry presence like Bretonnia or High Elves or Vampire Counts, you don't really want to be bringing these guys. Chaos, where you need to deal with monsters. Lizardmen, I wouldn't really recommend it. Tomb Kings, that sort of stuff. I wouldn't really recommend them in a lot of those cases. I think they are a little bit niche, but certainly there are some matchups where you can get good use out of them. Perhaps they might be okay getting into the Dark Elf matchup as well, because just having that just having those shields could make them a little tankier, and having that those great melee stats would honestly let them hold out against, say, Cold One Knights, and then they can do a much better job against Dark Elf infantry, which is often just the bane of your existence as Empire. But regardless, this was a fun comp. You guys did get to see Demigryph Knights in action. Yeah, I do apologize. It was a little rambly, but Also, terror bombing. Force and the Amber Wizard with the Jade Wizard backing them, you can often just strip the Amber Wizard down, bring them just for the Blood Roar, and against low leadership factions such as Beastmen, such as Skavens, such as Greenskins, this is a devastating combo. Their leadership can generally not hold up. And even, let's say your opponent does go with, say, a very wide Black Orc build, in which case they've got high enough leadership and immunity to psychology, you can still pick off isolated flank units. It means that if you catch out your opponent's cav or units like that, you can immediately nuke them and get them off the field. Otherwise, for the build, Pistoliers are becoming a much more better unit in my opinion. I still don't like the fact they're not AP, but that is simply a personal taste issue rather than a competitive issue. I think that from a competitive perspective, at this point, Pistoliers are in a good, if not amazing, spot. Some decent non-AP damage. They're fairly cheap. They can charge a little bit into melee, better than they were able to previously. So definitely, I would recommend Pistoliers as a much more respectable unit now than they were about a year or so ago. They've come a long way. Spearmen, well, there's Spearmen or Spearmen. For my opponent's build, I do think that if there was any criticism for me to have here, it's really that there's just not enough tools to deal with heavy cav. So this is a very wide build, and you can like swamp a formation of infantry, especially if you pop Wa. But Empire heavy cav is something you're going to have to deal with a lot, and Nasty Skulkers, like the Squigs and the Savage Orc Boar Wizard, just aren't going to cut it. Nasty Skulkers are a good cav counter, but that's it, essentially. Them and Scarsnake. That's not, I guess the Orc Shaman had Foot of Cork, but really that's not something to count on. If your opponent goes with like double Rice Guard, double Knights of the Blazing Sun, which is a build I personally actually enjoy using. It's actually another one of my builds that I like using against Greenskins. There's a lot of different builds you can bring here, but one unit of Nasty Skulkers isn't protecting you there. If your opponent goes with this, it obviously isn't going to help. You need more anti-large tools, and I think bringing some Orc Boar with big guns, especially the Broken Tusk Mob, great choice. Otherwise, more Nasty Skulkers, some serious missile pressure. It's also why I like Wardsag, because he does have a snare with the effigy they get. But regardless, well played to my opponent, an act of God here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and fun to watch some Chevygryph action. If you did, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Share if you want to do that. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, as usual, do not hesitate to post them. Any requests, all that sort of stuff. I will respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.